subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.
My name is Edward M. Hayes. 71 years. Once upon a time, I was a teacher. Not just a man who handed out worksheets or graded essays with red ink, but a real teacher. The kind students remembered. The kind who stayed late after class helping a kid who didn't know how to spell tomorrow. The kind who quoted Whitman and Frost from memory and believed words could build bridges in places bullets never should have been. For 33 years I stood in front of a chalkboard in room 212 at Franklin High School in Springfield, Ohio. I taught English literature, American poetry, and, for a brief 5-year stretch, a creative writing elective that changed more lives than I can count. Now, I live alone in a creaking one-story house with chipped paint and a mailbox full of grocery store ads I never asked for. My wife, Margaret, died 6 years ago this December. Stroke. Quick. Cruel. Final. After she passed, the silence in this house changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hungry. It gnawed at the corners of every room like rats behind the drywall. My son, Brian, lives 2 states away. Works in tech. Something with strategy in the title. I raised him with bedtime stories and dinners at the table. I read him of mice and men when he was 12, and he cried when Lenny died. He doesn't cry anymore. He doesn't visit either. Last Christmas, he sent me an Amazon gift card and a group text that said, "Merry Christmas from all of us." There was a picture attached, him, his wife Melissa, and their kids, Lucy and Nate, posing by a tree I've never seen in a house I've never stepped foot in. Lucy is 11 now. She probably doesn't even remember the old man who taught her to whistle through her teeth when she was 5. I don't blame them. That's the hardest part. I blame me. Somewhere along the way, I became a man people forget. I used to think retirement would be like one of those warm-toned TV commercials, coffee on the porch, crossword puzzles, maybe coaching a local debate team. Instead, I wake up to aching joints and a calendar full of blank squares. No one calls. No one needs advice. No one says, "Hey, Mr. Hayes, remember when you told me I could be a writer?" Because they don't remember. And maybe that's what hurts the most, not the loneliness, not the silence, not even the way my knees crack when I climb the stairs. It's the erasure. The slow, silent deletion of your name from the world. I was once the man who gave students their voice. Who clapped the chalk dust off his sleeves and stayed after school for the boy whose dad was in prison. I believed in kids when no one else did. But now I'm just, sir, or worse, invisible. There's a girl who jogs past my house every morning. Earbuds in, ponytail swaying. She runs right by without so much as a glance. Last week, I smiled at her. She flinched, sped up. Probably thought I was some weirdo. I wanted to say, "I'm not what you think. I taught 1,000 kids like you how to write about heartbreak and hope." But I didn't. Because she wouldn't care. It's strange, the mind doesn't age the way the body does. I still feel like that man in room 212 some days. I still remember the scent of dry erase markers, the scratch of notebooks, the way the room would fall silent when I read aloud. But when I look in the mirror, I don't see him anymore. I see a face time forgot. A few days ago, I took out my old yearbooks. I found a note from a girl named Tara. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Hayes, you saved me. Not with medicine or money, but with your words. You're the reason I'm alive." That was 1998. I don't know where Tara is now. She could be anywhere. She could be no one. She could be a mother, a lawyer, a waitress, or a ghost. But I remember her. Just like I remember them all. They don't know it, but I kept their essays. The good ones. The ones where they bled onto paper. They're in a box in the closet, labeled, "Lessons Worth Keeping." I open it sometimes, like a priest with a book of confessions. And yet, in all these years of teaching others how to speak, I never learned how to ask for help. So I sit. I wait. I wonder if the world remembers me, or if I was only ever important inside those 4 walls of room 212. And then something happened. 2 days ago, I got a letter. No return address. Just a name on the back, Daniel Ray. I hadn't heard that name in over 25 years. And I'll never forget him. Not after what happened. Daniel Ray. I hadn't heard that name since the fall of 1997. He was 16, quiet, always sat in the back of the room, hoodie up, eyes low, words barely above a whisper. The other teachers thought he was trouble. Office visits. Detentions. They said he had the look. That look that makes people uncomfortable before they even know your name. But I saw something else. One day, I found a crumpled piece of paper in the trash next to his desk. Most teachers would have tossed it. I unfolded it. It was a poem. Rough, raw, bleeding at the edges with pain and clarity. A boy screaming in silence. I didn't call him out. I didn't embarrass him. The next day, I left a note on his desk. If you ever want to write more, I'll read it. Nothing more. No pressure. He started leaving poems under my door. Always anonymous, always late, always brilliant. For months, we never talked about it. He never signed his name. But I knew. That year, he came to class every single day. No absences. No detentions. His grades went up. His voice got stronger. At the end of the year, he wrote me a short note. Thanks for seeing me. And then he disappeared. I heard the rumors years later, drugs, juvenile hall, a fight, a name change maybe. He fell through the cracks, the way kids do when the system forgets how to care. So when I saw his name on the back of that envelope, I froze. My hands trembled in a way they hadn't even when Margaret died. The letter was handwritten. Slanted letters, pressed hard into the paper. It read, Mr. Hayes. You probably don't remember me. That's okay. Most people don't remember me the way you did. They remember headlines. Arrest records. One bad night in '99 that defined the rest of my life. But you saw something before all that. You saw a boy trying not to drown. Your class was the only place I felt human. And your note, I'll read it, was the first time anyone gave a damn. I've been clean for 6 years. I work at a youth center now. I teach poetry to kids like I was. Last week, I asked them to write about the person who changed their life. And I realized, I never told mine. So here it is. Thank you. You saved me. If you ever want to visit, the door's open. With gratitude. Daniel Ray. ****. I sat in my kitchen for an hour, letter in hand, cup of tea gone cold. The street outside was quiet, that heavy, hollow kind of quiet that seeps through the windows. I felt something move in my chest. Something that hadn't stirred in a long, long time. For years I had convinced myself I didn't matter anymore. That teaching was a spark that fizzled out. That everything I gave was swallowed into the past, like a stone dropped into a lake. But here it was. Echoing back. I stood up, slowly, knees cracking like old wood, and walked to the closet. I opened the box marked, Lessons Worth Keeping. Inside. A sonnet written by a girl whose mother used to beat her. A short story from a boy who said nothing in class but dreamed of galaxies. A letter from a student who came out after senior year and thanked me for making the classroom feel safe. I ran my fingers across the pages. They were fragile now, edges browned, ink faded, but the words still burned with truth. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd just been waiting for someone to remember. Daniel remembered. And something about that cracked open a part of me I thought was sealed forever. I didn't cry. I'm not sure I can anymore. But I felt warm. Like I had a name again. Later that evening, I tried calling Brian. It went to voicemail. I left a message. Hey, it's Dad. I wanted to hear your voice. That's all. Hope you're doing well. Love you. He didn't call back. And I didn't expect him to. Because for the first time in years, I realized something. I don't need them to remember me. I need to remember me. That night, I wrote a letter back to Daniel. It was simple. Honest. No grand speech. Just one line. You were never invisible to me. Keep teaching. That's the only way we stay alive. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. I watched the sunrise instead. It felt like the first one in years. The third chair has a scratch on the side. Margaret used to sit there. She always hated that scratch. Said it made the whole dining set look tired. I'd run my fingers over it during breakfast just to tease her, and she'd swat my hand away with a smile and that mock stern voice, "Edward, you'll ruin the finish." Now, the scratch is still there. But no one sees it. No one cares if the wood looks tired. I suppose that makes two of us. We used to have a table for 6. Thanksgiving dinners with Brian, his college roommate, a neighbor or two. Margaret insisted on cloth napkins. I always carved the turkey. The house rang with laughter, the kind that rattles the windows and softens the ears. Now, it's just me. One mug. One plate. One chair. I don't even sit at the table anymore. It feels like pretending. Like setting a stage where no actors ever arrive. So I eat in the kitchen. By the window. Same cup of black coffee. Same cereal. Same silence. This morning, I stared at that empty chair for a long time. Not just Margaret's. All of them. I thought about how something can look perfectly fine, polished wood, sturdy legs, smooth finish, and still feel like it's falling apart because the people it was built for are gone. Loss doesn't come like in the movies. It's not a scream or a moment. It's slow. It's quiet. It creeps in through the spaces where voices used to be. I went down to the basement to find something, I don't even remember what, and I passed Margaret's sewing machine. Still covered with the little floral cloth she used. I hadn't touched it in 6 years. I don't cry. I told you that. But sometimes, I feel tears that never fall, they press right behind the eyes, like a storm that refuses to break. I remember once, not long after she passed, Brian came to visit. The only time. He walked through the house like a stranger. He said, "Dad, why haven't you sold any of this stuff? It's depressing." I told him, because it was her. And he just shook his head. As if love had an expiration date. When he left, he forgot his charger. I kept it. Still sitting in the drawer. It's strange, the things we hold onto when people let go of us. That afternoon, I walked past the local high school. I hadn't done that in years. Not since they replaced the old Franklin building with a newer one made of glass and steel. Cold. Clean. Sterile. The kids were just getting out. Backpacks. Phones. Headphones. Not one of them looked up. I stood by the fence like a ghost of someone who used to matter. And for a moment, I felt that familiar ache, the one that whispers, "You are no one now." But then. A girl dropped her notebook. She didn't notice. Pages scattered across the sidewalk. I bent down slowly, carefully, and gathered them. Poems. Lyrics. Handwritten doodles of stars and skulls. A kid trying to understand the world. When she turned around and saw me holding her pages, she froze. Probably thought I was some creep. I handed them to her and said quietly, "Keep writing. You have a voice." She blinked. Nodded. Mumbled, "Thanks." It was a moment. Brief. Fragile. But real. And when I got home, something inside me shifted. Not dramatically. Just slightly. I looked at the table. The 6 chairs. The scratch. And for the first time in years, I sat down in my old seat. The head of the table. I set a second cup of tea across from me. Just like I used to for Margaret. And I spoke, not loudly, not desperately. Just enough to hear myself. "I'm still here," I said. "I still have something to give." No one answered. But the silence didn't feel as empty as before. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I had anywhere to be. That hasn't been true in years. I just felt awake. Not in the usual aching, insomniac way, but awake in the way I used to feel before the first day of school. I walked over to the mirror and looked at the men I've been avoiding. White stubble. Thin skin. A scar under my lip I'd forgotten how I got. He looked older, yes. But also, somehow, more real. Like a man who'd survived something. Or maybe was just starting to. I opened the closet and pulled out the old tweed jacket with the leather elbows. It still fit. Barely. I buttoned the middle, left the top one open, just like I used to. The fabric smelled like dust, paper, and time. I stood in the center of my living room, looking at nothing. Then I did something I hadn't done in decades. I began to teach. No audience. No chalkboard. No students. Just me. And the silence. I quoted Langston Hughes. Read the opening paragraph of To Kill a Mockingbird. Talked about metaphor, about how a broken teacup can mean more than a war. I paced, gestured, even asked rhetorical questions. What is a voice? I said aloud, to no one. A sound. A weapon. A wound. I let the question hang in the air. Then I walked to the box in the closet, lessons worth keeping, and pulled out one paper at random. A short poem. No name. Titled, When the World Forgets You. I read it aloud. Slowly. When the world forgets you. You shrink. You vanish between phone calls never made. And birthdays missed. But somewhere. In the drawer of someone else's memory. You are still a sentence not erased. When I finished, I closed my eyes and just breathed. I had always believed teaching was about students. About change. About shaping others. But now I see, it was never just about them. It was about me. About staying alive. I needed to speak to remember who I was. That afternoon, I walked to the community center. The same one where Margaret used to volunteer during the holidays. There was a sign in the window. After school tutoring volunteers needed, apply inside. I hesitated. Not because I was unsure. But because I realized I hadn't entered a building to give something in years. Inside, a young woman at the desk looked up. She had purple glasses and a messy bun. Can I help you? Yes, I said. I used to be a teacher. I'd like to offer my time. She smiled. Not condescending. Not dismissive. Just a smile. We need someone for writing help. High school level. 2 afternoons a week. I can do that. She handed me a form. Name. Edward Hayes, I said. Her pen froze for a second. Wait. Daniel talks about you. I blinked. Daniel Ray. She nodded. He runs poetry workshops here. Said you changed his life. I didn't answer. Couldn't. I just smiled, quietly, tightly, and filled out the form. When I left the center, the sky was orange. The kind of November sky that makes even dying trees look like fire. I passed a group of teenagers sitting on the steps outside the gas station. Loud. Swearing. Laughing. One of them tossed an empty can at a trash bin and missed. As I walked by, one of them muttered, "Old men got nothing better to do." I stopped. Turned to him. And with a calm, steady voice I said, "Actually, I do. I'm about to teach someone how to tell their story. So that maybe they won't end up on a sidewalk, throwing cans, and mistaking noise for meaning." The boy blinked. His friends laughed awkwardly. But he didn't. He just stared at me like I'd spoken in a language he forgot he understood. I walked on. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt etched in. Like a sentence in permanent ink. And I knew, this was not my ending. This was my final lesson. And someone, somewhere, was finally ready to listen. They didn't say it to my face. Not really. But I heard it. The whisper behind closed doors. The silence when I entered a room. The forced smiles at family gatherings, like I was a guest in a house I built with my bare hands. Mr. Nobody. That's who I became. Not the men who stayed late at school to talk a girl out of suicide. Not the husband who held Margaret's hand through 4 rounds of chemo. Not the father who gave up a college fellowship so Brian could have braces and soccer cleats. Just sir. Or worse, nothing at all. Even in my own family. The last time Brian and I sat face to face, he spent more time on his phone than talking to me. I had cooked roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, Margaret's recipe. He picked at the food and said, "You know, Dad, you're lucky. Most people your age just fade out. Fade out." As if my life were a photograph slowly turning gray. As if I hadn't built the very frame his life was printed on. I didn't argue. Didn't shout. Didn't slam a fist on the table, though God knows I wanted to. I just looked at him and said, "You'll understand someday. When someone you love looks through you like glass." He rolled his eyes. "Not everything has to be a metaphor, Dad." And that was that. He left early. Didn't even take the leftovers. But today, standing in front of a dozen teenagers in a small room at the community center, something happened. Something I didn't expect. They listened. Not politely. Not because they had to. But with eyes wide open, heads tilted, pens scribbling as fast as their hands could move. One girl, maybe 16, raised her hand and asked, "Mr. Hayes, how do you write about someone who hurt you, without sounding weak?" I paused. Felt my throat tighten. Then said, "By telling the truth, but telling it from strength, not spite." They stared. I continued. Pain doesn't make you weak. What you do with it, that's where the strength lives. I could see it. That moment, the click. That thing teachers wait for. They weren't just hearing me. They were feeling me. Not Mr. Nobody. Just Mr. Hayes again. After class, Daniel came in. Smiled like an old friend, which, in a strange way, he was. "Place suits you," he said. I nodded. "It's small. But real." He looked at the kids through the glass door. "They'll remember you. You know that, right?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because suddenly, I realized, I didn't want revenge. Not really. Not on Brian. Not on the school that forgot my name. Not even on the world that moved on without me. I didn't want to make them feel what I felt. I wanted to show them who I still was. That was my answer. Not a scream. Not a letter. Just living with such quiet purpose, it made their silence feel small. That night, I got an email. From Brian. Subject line, "Lucy's assignment, you should see this." I hesitated before opening it. Then clicked. It was a scanned essay. A school project. The Person Who Inspires Me Most, by Lucy Hayes, age 11. She wrote about an old man who smells like books and tells stories that sound like magic. She wrote about the time I taught her to whistle. About how I told her poems were like puzzles, and that words could build houses. She ended it with, "My grandpa makes me feel like I matter. That's why I want to be like him." Underneath, in Brian's handwriting, "I forgot how good you were. I'm sorry, Dad. We'll come visit next week." I stared at the screen. I didn't cry. Still can't. But I exhaled. Long, deep. Whole. Mr. Nobody. Not anymore. They remembered. And that was enough. A week later, I stood in front of Franklin High School for the first time in almost 10 years. The new building towered over the old parking lot. Sleek. Silver. Glass everywhere. The kind of school that looks like a hospital. Clinical. Impressive. Soulless. Room 212 was gone, of course. Demolished with the rest of the old wing 5 years ago. But I didn't come for the walls. I came for the space that used to hold something sacred. I asked the front desk if I could visit the new English hallway. The woman smiled, politely, and said, "Are you a former parent?" I looked at her and replied, "I used to be something like that." She gave me a visitor badge that read, "Edward Hayes, guest." Guest. Not teacher. Not Mr. Hayes. Just guessed. I didn't mind. Not anymore. I walked the hallway slowly, letting my fingers trail along the new lockers. Cold metal. Still covered in stickers and scratched initials. Some things never change. Outside classroom 2B, I stopped. A teacher inside, mid-30s, khakis, ponytail, was reading aloud. And that's why Atticus Finch remains one of the great moral figures in American literature, she said. My heart ached, in that gentle, aching way old pianos sound. She noticed me through the window. I smiled and nodded. She nodded back. Neither of us spoke. Just then, I felt a tug on my coat. Lucy. She had run down the hallway with Brian just behind her, out of breath. Grandpa, she beamed. Brian slowed down, looked at me, really looked. There was something in his face I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. Hope we're not late, he said. I shook my head. Just in time. We walked outside, into the courtyard behind the building. And I showed Lucy where the old room 212 used to be. It was here, I told her. Right here. Chalkboard was on that wall. Third desk from the left had a girl who could recite Shakespeare backwards. She looked around, confused. But, there's nothing here now. I smiled. Exactly. Then I knelt, and pulled something from my coat. A single sheet of paper. One of the poems Daniel had left under my door all those years ago. I handed it to her. Read it, I said. She did, slowly, carefully. Each word like a small stone placed with purpose. They say time forgets. But rooms remember. Chalk remembers. Even silence holds the shape of a voice. Even dust can keep a name. When she finished, she looked up. Did Daniel write that? I nodded. And he teaches kids like you now. He remembered me, long after the world forgot. Brian said nothing. But his eyes said everything. There, in that empty courtyard, with no room, no chalk, no students, I taught my last lesson. Not with lectures. Not with red pens. Not even with a voice. But with presence. I had lived long enough to become invisible. Only to realize, it is not the world's job to see you. It is your job to stand so still and true that the world can't help but feel your echo. That night, I sat at the head of the table again. Lucy beside me. Brian across. A full meal. Real food. Laughter, even. When they left, Lucy hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me something real." I watched them drive away under the autumn sky. Then I sat alone. But not lonely. I turned off the lights. Let the quiet in. It wasn't empty anymore. Just still. Like a classroom after the final bell. Epilogue. I once believed my value was measured by who remembered my name. But the truth is simpler and harder. Your value isn't what they say after you're gone. It's what you leave behind while you're still here. One voice. One room. One soul who didn't give up. That's enough.